Jon Jones had always been a man of routine. Wake up before the sun, train until his muscles screamed, eat clean, keep focused, stay sharp. The discipline that made him a champion inside the cage shaped every corner of his life. But what discipline never prepared him for was silence, the kind that crept in between fights in the hours when there were no lights, no crowds, just him and the echo of his own thoughts. It was during one of these quiet mornings that he noticed her, Rosa, his housekeeper for the past 3 years. She was always on time, always quiet, always grateful. She moved through the house like a whisper, tidying rooms, folding clothes, washing dishes, always with her eyes cast down and her back slightly hunched, as if carrying the weight of something Jon couldn't see. He barely knew anything about her. She spoke when spoken to, never complained, and never asked for more than what she earned. But that morning, as Jon passed by the kitchen, he saw something different. Rosa stood by the window, her hands clutching the sink, her eyes wet with something unspoken. When she noticed him, she quickly turned away, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay, Rosa?" he asked, not out of habit, but because for the first time he truly wondered. "Sigh, Mr. Jones, all good." Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. He let it go, at least on the surface. But that image, her small figure bathed in pale morning light, clutching the edge of the sink like a lifeline, stayed with him. For days he watched more closely. She always left precisely at 6 p.m., walking down the long driveway and disappearing past the gate. She never used a car. She never accepted a ride, just left on foot, every evening, no matter the weather. And something about that quiet exit, it gnawed at him. So one evening after she left, Jon waited 10 minutes, grabbed a hoodie and followed. He didn't know why. Maybe guilt, maybe instinct. But something inside told him this wasn't just a woman heading home. This was a story unraveling in slow motion, and he needed to know it. He followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows. Rosa walked with purpose but not haste, her small frame wrapped in a worn-out jacket, her hands buried in her pockets. She crossed 3 blocks before turning into an alley he never knew existed, slipping behind a row of run-down apartment buildings. Jon hesitated. This wasn't his world. He was stepping into something private, something raw. But curiosity overpowered comfort. He followed. And that's when he saw it. Rosa approached a rusted metal door and knocked gently. Twice, then once more. A child's voice answered. A girl, no older than 10, opened the door with wide, tired eyes. "Mama," she whispered and wrapped her arms around Rosa's waist. Jon froze. Rosa had a daughter. He watched, hidden, as Rosa stepped inside. Through a cracked curtain, he saw the interior. A single room, 1 mattress, a small heater, 2 plates. The walls stained with time, the silence heavy, and then something broke inside him. He had paid her well. He assumed she lived comfortably. But here she was, working full days, walking home through dangerous streets, returning to a room barely fit for survival, just to be with her daughter. And she had never asked for more, never told him, never complained. That night, Jon didn't sleep. He lay awake thinking of every time he had nodded absently at Rosa, every time he had tossed his gym clothes on the floor for her to pick up, every time he had walked past her like she was part of the furniture. The next morning, he waited for her in the kitchen. When Rosa entered, she flinched slightly, surprised to see him there. "Rosa," he said gently, "can we talk?" Her face stiffened. "If I did something wrong." "No, you didn't." "I did. I've been blind." She looked confused. Jon took a deep breath. "I followed you last night. I know I shouldn't." "Have? But I saw where you live. I saw your daughter." Silence. Then shame flooded Rosa's face. She turned away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to mix my problems with your life. I just needed the job. I didn't want pity." "It's not pity," Jon said, voice steady. "It's humanity." Rosa's shoulders shook. "I used to be a teacher in El Salvador, but I fled when the gangs threatened my daughter. This was the only place we could be safe. But papers, work, it's hard. This job saved us. You saved us." Jon felt his throat tighten. For years he had thought of himself as a warrior, But this was a quiet, humble, resilient woman. She was something more. She was survival in its purest form. And suddenly, Jon Jones knew that his real fight had only just begun. Jon didn't go to the gym that morning. He didn't answer calls or scroll through messages. He sat alone at the edge of his bed, hands clasped, heart pounding with a quiet urgency that no fight had ever given him. Rosa's story haunted him, not because it was unique, but because it had been invisible. He had passed it by every day, smiling politely, saying thank you, never asking the questions that truly mattered. How many others like her walked among the wealthy, unnoticed, dignified in silence? That afternoon, he asked Rosa if she could stay a little longer. She hesitated at first, but eventually nodded. He made them coffee, not the prepped kind, but a slow-brewed, hand-prepared one like his mother used to make. Rosa sat across from him, hands in her lap, unsure how to exist in this version of his world. "Tell me about her," Jon said softly. "Your daughter." Rosa's face lit up even as her eyes remained cautious. "Her name is Camilla. She loves stars, wants to be an astronaut." She smiled, small and proud. "Says one day she'll fly far away and come back to take me with her." Jon chuckled, then grew quiet. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because people don't want stories like mine. They want quiet, efficiency, smiles. That's what I gave you." Her words weren't bitter, just true. Jon leaned back, feeling the weight of that truth. That changes today. Over the next week, Jon's world shifted. He began to see his own home with different eyes, the photos on the wall, the trophies, the luxuries, all untouched by struggle, all built on victories that, while hard-earned, had never required the kind of courage Rosa carried daily. He started showing up at local community centers, listening to stories, not as a celebrity, as a student. He brought groceries to the alley Rosa called home, disguised in boxes, never asking for thanks. Then one night, he invited Rosa and Camilla to dinner, not as staff, but as guests. Rosa almost refused. "We're not used to all this," she said, looking at the grand dining room. "Neither am I," Jon replied, "not anymore." Camilla was shy at first, but as soon as Jon asked her about the stars, her face lit up. She described constellations, planets, black holes, her voice rising with excitement. "Do you think someone like me can really go up there?" she asked. Jon looked at her, this small girl in borrowed shoes and radiant dreams. "Absolutely," he said. "In fact, I think you already shine brighter than most stars I've met." Rosa wiped her eyes in silence. That evening, as they left, Jon made a decision, not out of guilt, out of love. He called his lawyer. He called a friend who ran a non-profit for immigrants. He called a school principal he had met once during an event. And within a month, Camilla was enrolled in one of the best STEM programs in the state, on a full scholarship. Papers were filed to support Rosa's residency status. A safer apartment was secured through a quiet foundation Jon funded anonymously. When Rosa tried to thank him, he stopped her. "You've already paid me," he said, "with your strength, your dignity. Your silence taught me how loud compassion can be." She cried that day, for the first time, not in shame or fear, but in relief. Jon watched them drive to their new home, Camilla waving out the window, clutching a small telescope he'd gifted her. And as he stood on the porch alone, he realized something that chilled him more than any opponent ever had. The real world wasn't out there in the cage. It was here, in quiet hallways, in back alleys, in lives too often ignored. And if he had the power to change even one, he had no excuse not to. That night, for the first time in a long time, Jon Jones slept peacefully. Jon's days took on a different rhythm. He still trained, still ran his miles, and struck the pads with precision. But something had shifted inside him. Every punch, every bead of sweat, now carried a purpose deeper than victory. He started using his platform to tell stories, not his own, but the kind the world often ignored. Rosa and Camilla became the quiet inspiration behind every interview. He gave, though he never named them. He spoke of resilience, dignity, and invisible battles, planting seeds in places where cameras usually chased spectacle. But not everyone welcomed this new version of Jon. One morning, as he arrived at the gym, Coach Harris pulled him aside. "You're distracted," he said. You're not fighting like before. Jon met his eyes and nodded slowly. I'm fighting for something bigger now. The coach sighed. Just don't forget who you are. That's the thing, Jon said. I finally remember who I am. Meanwhile, Rosa was thriving. She stood taller, smiled easier. Camilla was blossoming at her new school, already being noticed by teachers for her sharp mind and boundless curiosity. Jon visited them often, never making a scene, always respectful of their space. He brought books, science kits, and once even arranged a Zoom call with an actual astronaut. Camilla wept with joy that day, but just as life began to feel stable, the past came knocking. Rosa received a letter, thick, stamped, official. She brought it to Jon, hands trembling. It's from the immigration office, she whispered. He opened it gently. It was a notice of review. A former employer, anonymous, had challenged her residency filing. Her case was being reopened. Panic swept through her like a cold wind. Jon read the letter again, jaw tightening. We'll fight it, he said, I promise. That night he called in every favor. Lawyers, advocates, senators he'd once met at charity galas. He posted a cryptic message online, nothing revealing, but powerful. When we fight for someone who gave us nothing but love, we honor the fight in ourselves. It went viral within hours. The story wasn't public, but the sentiment connected. Donations poured into immigrant defense funds. Celebrities quietly messaged him offering help. And still, Rosa stayed silent, afraid to be seen, afraid to hope. Then, a week before the hearing, Jon had an idea. He brought Rosa and Camilla to the gym. I want you to meet someone, he said. Outside, waiting, was Carla Mendez, a former UFC fighter, now an advocate for immigrant athletes. She hugged Rosa without hesitation. You're not alone, she said. Not anymore. That day, Rosa trained alongside Jon. Just simple movements, breathing, balance, stance. Why? She asked, sweat beading on her brow. Because you've fought all your life, Jon said. It's time you feel it in your body. When the day of the hearing came, Rosa walked in not as a defendant but as a warrior. She wore her best dress. Camilla held her hand, and Jon sat behind them, in silence, eyes unwavering. The judge read the case. The challenge was flimsy, unsupported. But the fear in Rosa didn't fade until she stood and spoke. Her voice was small at first, then stronger. I'm not asking for charity, she said. I am asking for the right to live in peace, to raise my daughter with dignity. The room was silent. And when the judge finally smiled and said, Petition sustained, Rosa didn't cry. She exhaled long and slow like a fighter hearing the final bell. Outside the courthouse, Jon knelt before Camilla. Now go reach those stars, he whispered, because nothing is holding you down anymore. And as Rosa hugged him, words failing, Jon whispered, Thank you for saving me too. Because, somewhere in fighting for their right to belong, Jon had found a home in himself again. The days that followed the court ruling felt like sunlight after a long storm. Rosa and Camilla moved without fear now, their shoulders lighter, their smiles no longer edged with worry. Jon noticed the change immediately. How Rosa sang softly while folding laundry, how Camilla skipped instead of walked. For Jon, that peace meant something sacred. It wasn't just about helping someone anymore. It was about healing something fractured in his own soul. One evening, as he stood in the doorway watching them laugh over a simple dinner, Jon felt something crack open in him. Not pain this time, but gratitude. He thought back to the many nights he'd come home to silence, walls echoing with trophies, and the empty thud of footsteps that meant nothing. Here, in this small apartment barely lit by second-hand lamps and the warmth of people who had suffered yet never surrendered, Jon found something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Meaning. But fate, as always, does not rest. That week, a popular sports network aired a Where Are They Now? Segment featuring Jon. Most of it was respectful, highlighting his return to form, his mentorship work. But one guest, a retired analyst with a grudge, made a passing remark that would ignite everything. Jones is soft now, the man said, smirking. All that hugging and helping, he forgot what makes a real fighter. Within hours, the quote was viral. Social media split in two. Some defended Jon, praising his heart, his growth. Others called him distracted, weak. One comment: cut deepest. He used to scare opponents, now he plays charity with maids. Rosa saw it by accident. She closed the laptop without a word, but Jon noticed the shift. That night, as she washed dishes, he stepped beside her. "I don't care what they say," he said. "They don't see what I see." Rosa didn't look up. "It's not about me," she whispered. "It's your name, your career." Jon placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're my legacy now." But it wasn't over. The network doubled down. Days later, Jon was invited to a live panel debate, an ambush in disguise. The host, sly and polished, opened with charm, then pivoted. "You've gone from champion to social worker," he said. "Some say you've lost your edge." Jon's jaw tensed. He smiled calmly. "You confuse edge with emptiness," he said. "I've never been more dangerous, because now I fight with purpose." The crowd went silent. The host pushed. "You mean helping a housekeeper gives you more than belts ever did?" Jon nodded slowly. "Yes, because she never had the luxury of losing and starting over. She had to win every day just to survive. That's a champion." The clip exploded online. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Fighters, fans, even former critics rallied behind him. Hashtags trended. Donations surged again for shelters, for legal aid. Rosa, overwhelmed, stayed quiet, but Camilla wasn't silent. She made a video with Jon, unscripted, simple. "He's my hero," she said, "because he saw us when no one else did." It went global. Schools played it, teachers cried. Sponsors called Jon with offers he ignored. This wasn't about brand deals anymore, and yet something still lingered. A shadow he couldn't name. It came one night in the form of a letter. No return address. Inside was a photograph, old and faded. It showed Rosa, years younger, holding a baby outside a burned-down building. On the back, "You think you know her? Ask what she lost in Mexico." Jon stared at it for a long time, not with suspicion, with sorrow. Because even now, after everything, Rosa's pain was deeper than she'd ever shared. And he knew, if he was truly going to stand beside her, he had to follow that pain all the way to its source. Jon's mind raced as he held the photograph, the edges curling slightly from age and wear. He knew Rosa trusted him, but the weight of this hidden past now lay between them, fragile and raw. One quiet afternoon, as the sun filtered through thin curtains, Jon finally broached the subject. "Rosa, I want to understand. Whatever you went through, I want to be there." She looked away, silence stretching until her voice trembled free. "That night my home was taken by fire, not by accident, but by men who wanted to silence my family. My father stood up against corruption, and they made sure no one would hear his voice again." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she continued. "We lost everything. Our village burned to ash, and with it, my childhood, my innocence." Jon's heart ached. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the pain is still alive," she whispered. "It's a wound I cover with work, with hope for Camilla, but it follows me." Jon took her hands, steady and strong. "We're going to face it together." They planned a trip, back to Mexico, to the village that time almost erased. Jon wanted to see the place that shaped Rosa's courage and fear. When they arrived, the air was thick with memory and loss. The villagers greeted Rosa with tears and embraces, grateful for her return but wary of old dangers. Together they walked the ashes, now wildflowers blooming amid destruction. Rosa's voice broke as she recounted the night when the fire came, how she escaped with Camilla, how her father's sacrifice meant their survival. Jon listened, silent witness to the shadows she carried. But among the pain, something else emerged, a spark of hope. The community was rebuilding, and Rosa was no longer alone. That night, as they sat beneath a sky bursting with stars, Jon realized that true strength was not in fighting alone, but in sharing the fight. He whispered to Rosa, "Your story is not just pain, it's power." She smiled through tears, and Jon knew this journey was just beginning. Back home, their bond was deeper, the silence between them filled with unspoken promises. Jon's mission expanded beyond the gym, beyond fame, toward justice, healing, and truth. The world might still judge, still question, but Jon no longer feared the weight of his heart, because sometimes the hardest battles are not in the ring, they are in the soul. The days after their return from Mexico carried a different weight. Rosa seemed lighter, yet beneath her smile, a storm still brewed. Jon watched as she struggled to reconcile her past with the fragile hope blooming in the present. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Rosa hesitated, then revealed a secret that shook Jon to his core, a threat still lingering from those dark days, aimed not only at her, but at Camilla. "They think I'm forgotten," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But they never forget those who speak out." Jon's protective instinct surged. He promised her safety, but also something deeper, justice. What began as a private vow soon spiraled into a fight that would test Jon's limits in ways the cage never had. He reached out to trusted allies, digging into the shadows that had hunted Rosa's family for years. Their investigation uncovered a web of corruption tied to powerful men who wielded influence like a weapon. Each revelation was a blow, but Jon and Rosa stood firm, bound by trust and an unyielding resolve. Meanwhile, Camilla blossomed into a symbol of hope herself, her laughter, her dreams, a light piercing the darkness around them. Yet the closer Jon got to the truth, the more dangerous the world became. One night, a silent knock shattered the calm, a warning, a test. But Jon was ready. In the end, it wasn't strength alone that saved them. It was the courage to face fear, to stand together when everything seemed lost. And as the first rays of dawn broke through the window, Jon realized that the greatest fight of all was not for titles or fame. It was for family, for redemption, and for the future they would build from the ashes. This was only the beginning. The tension that followed the warning knock lingered like a shadow over their small apartment. Rosa's resolve never wavered, but Jon saw the quiet moments when fear crept into her eyes. Together, they fortified their lives, but more importantly, their spirits. Jon's circle of friends and allies, once only fighters and trainers, expanded to include legal experts, journalists, and community leaders, all united by a desire to expose the truth hidden beneath layers of silence and danger. One afternoon, as Jon and Rosa met with a seasoned investigative reporter, the puzzle pieces began to fit. The corruption ran deeper than they imagined, linking local officials, business magnates, and even some in law enforcement. The path forward was perilous, but the stakes were clear. Exposing this would not only free Rosa's family name, but could dismantle a system built on fear and silence. Meanwhile, the public's view of Jon was shifting. No longer just a fighter or a celebrity, he was becoming a symbol of resilience and justice. Interviews, public appearances, and grassroots campaigns spread their message. Camilla's story touched hearts far beyond their neighborhood, yet amidst the growing hope, danger lurked closer than ever. One evening, returning from a meeting, Jon noticed a car trailing them. The chase was subtle at first, but Jon's instincts kicked in, his fighter's reflexes now sharpened by purpose rather than competition. They managed to lose the tail, but the message was clear. This battle was far from over. Then came the breaking point, a scandalous leak meant to discredit Rosa and Jon. Personal details twisted, motives questioned, trust challenged. The media frenzy threatened to unravel everything they fought for, but instead of retreating, Jon faced it head-on. In a live broadcast, he told their story. Not just the pain, but the courage, the truth, and the hope. His words resonated deeply, silencing doubts and inspiring thousands. The tides began to turn. Legal action gained momentum. Allies multiplied. The corrupt faced scrutiny they could no longer escape. And through it all, Rosa and Jon's bond grew unbreakable, forged in fire and fortified by love and unwavering commitment. As they stood together one quiet night, Jon whispered, "We fight not just to survive, but to change the world." Rosa nodded, tears in her eyes, knowing this was the legacy they would build, for Camilla, for their community, and for anyone who dared to hope. As the final legal battles unfolded, the once hidden corruption began to crumble under the weight of evidence and public scrutiny. Rosa's courage became a beacon, inspiring others who had suffered in silence to come forward. Jon, once known for his physical strength, now embodied a different kind of power, the strength to stand for what is right, even when it's hardest. But the victory was not without cost. The journey had taken a toll on them all, especially Rosa, who carried scars deeper than anyone could see. One evening, as the city's lights shimmered outside their window, Jon held Rosa's hand and whispered, "We changed the story, not just for us but for everyone who was silenced." Tears flowed freely, not of sorrow but of healing and hope. Camilla, unaware of the full weight of their struggle, smiled and laughed, a reminder of why the fight was worth everything. And in that moment, Jon realized the true meaning of family: resilience and redemption. Their story was no longer just theirs. It was a testament to the human spirit's ability to rise, to heal, and to overcome. As the screen fades to black, the message lingers. Even in the darkest moments, hope can shine through. Sometimes it takes just one person to stand up and change everything. If you found this story moving, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to inspire others. Because every story like this deserves to be heard.